As you probably often hear in these kind of events on Zoom, it's helpful if you either write down your questions and hold them. We'll have two different times. We're going to pause and have questions, or if you want to put them in the chat, that works too. And other than that, we would just ask you to keep yourselves on mute unless you are speaking. With no further ado, I'm going to get started. We also, Marion Ott is going to be speaking as well, and many of you probably know Marion. So I'd say she's an old hand at this, but she might be offended.
Experienced.
Experienced, that's the word. That's the word. Okay. All right, just give me just a second. There we go. All right. So you're here to talk about poll watching in Tennessee, and with specifically the League of Women Voters. We hope there are three things about this that recognize the contribution that poll watching makes in assuring fair elections. This isn't just about finding out somebody's doing something wrong, but also capturing the people are doing things right, because most of the time that's what goes on. We have a section on Tennessee law that applies to poll workers, and also how you specifically can be a League of Women Voters Tennessee poll watcher. The structure today is we're going to start with that topic because we suspect a lot of you want to be poll watchers and want to know how. Then we have a section sort of what are some of the scenarios and what might happen, which we'll go through. And then the final section is about Tennessee laws. And we will say at each of that sections, while we're talking about questions, if you feel you've had enough, feel free to leave us. We won't be offended. That's one of the reasons we structured it in 3 sections. Marion, could you give us a little bit more about why poll watching is important?
Okay, I'm not seeing a new slide.
All right, let me see what's going on. It says your screen sharing is paused. That's interesting.
But anyway, while she's figuring that out, I will talk about poll watching for the League of Women Voters. I would say ours is more expansive than most groups that do it. Other groups, and certainly the League, are there to support the voters at the polling sites, and also to provide information and assistance if needed to encourage somebody to vote or resolve an issue. But we are also there to observe in general what's going on at the polls, hopefully to catch what I think is going to happen, to catch poll workers in the whole process doing a great job. It will also provide confidence, as I know personally, to voters when they know that the League of Women Voters is there observing things. And at the end, when we have everybody's observations together, we can report on what went well and maybe what went less well. And sometimes we've been able to make some suggestions for how to improve it going forward. So it's really about voters, but it's also about the process, and it's also about the polling sites and whether there's things that can be done to make it even better in the future.
I'm thinking you can probably see the slides now, right?
I can see that slide, yes.
Very good. Okay, so as we said, we're going to start with how to become a poll watcher. So prior to becoming a poll watcher, we encourage you to attend a training session, which you are doing. And for folks not here, we're going to provide a video of either this session or the one we did earlier in the week, so that anyone who wants to be a poll watcher can take advantage of seeing this. It's important for you to choose where and when you'd like to observe. There's a lot of flexibility in that. You can do your county, multiple counties, specific voting centers, or precincts. Precincts, of course, applies to election day. Voting centers can be just early voting, or few counties where they've converted to voting centers, it could be either early voting or day of the election. We also encourage you to go to more than one location. All you need to do is declare your intentions. We encourage you to stay as long or as short as you'd like. You do not have to be there all day. We think a 2-hour stint works really nicely to get a feel for what's going on and maybe to capture any events that could happen at that specific location. Very importantly, you need to keep your Tennessee ID up to date, as it will be required as a poll watcher, not just a voter. So
That's a recent change in the law, by the way, a few years ago. You have to be a Tennessee resident.
Does
so
it have to be a Tennessee ID or could it be a driver's license or a passport?
No,
there,
you have to, it has to be a Tennessee ID.
Thanks.
Because the requirement is that you be a resident of Tennessee. And when you're showing your ID, when you're voting, the purpose of that ID is to prove that you are who you say you are. And there, they wouldn't take an out-of-state license, but they would take a passport.
Okay, but not a driver's license. It has to be the actual Tennessee ID, the new Tennessee ID.
It can be a Tennessee driver's license.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a real ID Tennessee.
Real
driver's
ID. That's the name of it. Yeah.
No, but it has to be a Tennessee driver's license, not like Massachusetts or Kentucky or Florida. If you're a snowbird, it's got to be a
Okay,
Tennessee
okay.
license or Tennessee state ID.
Thank you. So once you've decided to be a poll worker and you've got yourself a little organized, you can apply online at the League of Women Voters Tennessee website. There's a separate tab on poll watching where you can find your applications and some other forms, which we'll go into. This form will ask where you're polling, the dates, and your local election commission, because you're going to be picking up things from your local election commission. So it's very important you know your local election commission or the election commission of the county you wish to poll watch. Perhaps there's a more interesting, troubling, whatever county nearby that you'd like to go to. So again, we're going to encourage you to have as much flexibility as you'd like to go to more than one location, several days. Really, it's up to you. And it's important that you apply no later than 2 weeks prior to the date you wish to serve as a poll watcher. We need to get certification, which we're going to talk about in just a second, and we need to make sure all the paperwork gets done in time. Certification. The County Election Commission issues certification, which must be with you when you actually poll watch. The League has a project manager who will make the request on your behalf and will coordinate with you to obtain your credentials. You need to pick up those credentials 2 or more days before the election or the day you are choosing to serve. So getting certification is critical. The League would be the sponsoring entity, and our project manager will make sure to work with you to make sure you get it.
Yeah, I will say during early voting, you can often go pick up your credentials the day you're going to do it and start, I've done a lot of early voting in surrounding rural counties, and I can show up and they will give me the credentials and I just start poll watching that day. I don't have to make 2 trips. However, we have to, and the League has to do it. We're the sponsoring organization for you as a poll watcher. So the League has to make application for credentials. And just to amplify what Marilyn said, it's better to ask for credentials and not use them than to find yourself wanting to go and not have the credentials, because you cannot get them at the last minute. By law, it has to be 2 days before election day, and that may not be enough time for all the communication that happens. So better to ask for credentials and not use them than want them and not have them.
Marion, that's a good segue because you're up next on.
Now I'm good. Okay. So in that same place that Marilyn talked about on the website, www.lwvtn.org, there is a poll watching tab. And under that tab, there is a form if you want to be a poll watcher. And then there's also a poll watcher reporting form. And then there's a voting incident form if you see something that you think needs to be called out separately. Before you go to wherever you're going to poll watch, I would encourage you to look at that form. It can be it is a Google form if you're familiar with that. You fill it out online and I can translate it into a spreadsheet, so it makes the data analysis much easier. But that'll give you a sense of what it is you want to pay attention to when you're there. It starts with observing. I mean, is this place accessible? Is there enough parking spaces? Some common sense. Probably you'll think of things that aren't being asked for on that form, and hopefully there's plenty of places to make more comments. When you arrive at the polling place, the first thing you're going to do is find the poll official, and there's usually a book you need to sign in. They're not unused to people being poll watchers, so you'll need to sign in with that, and then just look around. And as I said, the physical assessment of the place. We also, especially on election day, care about lines. How many people are in line? Do they seem like there's enough poll workers, enough machines, etc. Watch what's going on. I don't think, hopefully you won't see any problems, but sometimes you might. If you do see a problem, talk to the poll officer first. I mean, this is not we're not trying to play gotcha. We're not trying to create a big issue and say, see, they're not doing it right. We expect them to do it right. And I think most of the people I've met want to do it right. And if you say, hey, I thought it was supposed to be X. Oh, yeah, you're right. And they'll change it. An example might be, remember, elections involve a lot of people that only work a little bit of time on elections. So they might say to a voter, well, I'm sorry, your license is expired. You need to come up with you need to bring back a current license or we can't let you vote. Well, that's wrong. A license, it doesn't matter whether it's expired or not. And if you see that, you tell the poll watcher, hey, these licenses, oh yeah, you're right. And that'll get corrected. But if you do see a problem where it's not getting resolved, you can walk outside and talk to the voter and offer some assistance. So I can't see the bottom of the slide here. Did I say what I needed to here?
I think so. The only thing
Yeah,
I would
okay.
add, and this is, a voter is having a problem, you will sort of see it happen, even though where election commissions place poll watchers is really different by location. Sometimes you'll be a little far away, perhaps. I know that's true where I live. But if there's kind of a ruckus, so to speak, going on, if it seems like something, you'll know.
Absolutely. And you can go ask the poll official what happened, why. And if you see the person didn't end up voting, I normally try to follow that person outside and say, what was the issue? Do you want some help? And we'll get into, there's usually not a good reason to turn a voter away. They should at least be able to vote provisional. So this is it's not really, I guess it's a top 5 list, but this is my list of why I love being a poll watcher. First, it's a front row seat to democracy in action. And I know that sounds corny, but I just love watching people of all different kinds come in and vote. It's just a good slice of Tennessee to watch. It's also interesting to see how different each county does it and think, how could it be? But it is. I think some of it is better than others, but they all get the job done. Sometimes you can see things and know that there's a better way to do it. Now, of course, you can't interrupt how the voting is going, but it is an observation that can be made and shared later. So I was in one county after the GoVoteTN app was out there, where any issue ended up with a clerk having to call the downtown office to get it resolved. Well, and we haven't talked about it, but we encourage all the poll workers to download. In fact, every league member should download GoVoteTN. It is a great tool for helping voters. So if somebody shows up and they're not on the polls and they don't know where they're supposed to go to vote, you can put their name and birthday in this app and it will tell you where they're registered and where their precinct is. And, you know, you don't need to spend 5 minutes waiting for somebody to call downtown, and probably it's going to be longer than that on election day. So that would be a good way to reduce the line. So that's an example of something. I actually made that observation to the state and they were like, oh yeah, that would be a great idea. But now a poll worker on election day is not going to start doing something like that without their county administrator already having told them. So that's something that has to happen, you know, for the next time. Although there's nothing to stop us from walking out and using it to tell people what it says, because that is official from the state of Tennessee. I've also, starting from 2016 and on, when people realized that I was with the League of Women Voters, they were very pleased to see us there, because unfortunately this rhetoric about unfair elections, et cetera, is even getting worse. And a group like the League makes people feel a little more confident. And oh, did you see any problems? Nope, things seem to be going pretty well. So that's been good. I like helping people, I like talking to voters, and you know, you cannot do that in a polling place. I mean, you might be able to whisper, hey, do you want some help, and go outside with them, but most of the conversations need to be outside the 100-foot boundary, where, you know, now I'd use my GoVoteTN to see if they're even registered and where, and then talk about provisional ballots if that makes sense. And as I've said before, you get opportunities to suggest some improvements to the polling place, like using that app. One of my big bugaboos is safety. So I like to see cords taped down, not tripping hazards, and also privacy. I've suggested before that the machines could be reoriented to provide more privacy for voters, or even the last time I voted, I guess it was this summer, and I went in person, which is not what I usually do. They had 4 machines. I'm the only voter there, and they put me at the one so that the machine is visible to the people, the clerks. And after I voted, I said, you know, you don't need to do that. You should give people the privacy. I mean, I understand the room is small and you might have to use that machine, but you can see it. And they said, realized I was right. So hopefully I helped somebody else with that. Anyway, you might have come up with your own list. If I were really being cute, I'd say, oh, and lots of opportunities for little ditties or comments at dinner parties and all, but you know.
And you can certainly use those little ditties or comments when you do your report. Marion, can you give us some more details about the reporting?
Yes. We're going to use it to really, every time we've done it so far has been to reinforce the extent of how well run our elections are. Does that mean that everything's been perfect? No, there's always some issues, some machines that didn't get started, different issues, but almost we have never identified something that is what I would call systematic. That tends to be a precinct focused or an individual not understanding the law focused, not a we're running our elections wrong. But if we do see a trend in problems, particularly if they're not resolved, that would then be reported on. So let's just pick on the not recognizing an expired license as an ID. I wouldn't be shocked if 1 or 2 poll workers had to be reminded that it was acceptable. But if we find out that every single polling place we go to, we're running into that, that's a problem. That's a training problem. And so that would be something we definitely want to highlight. You want to always look at trends. How about wait times? One thing that I've actually never seen a voter challenge. I don't know what's going to happen now. You know, you hear so much rhetoric around all of that. So that would be something to be paying attention to. Look at how other people are poll watching. Are they professional and courteous or not? We definitely would be concerned about documenting or any anecdotes around intimidating or aggressive behavior. I think it's interesting, again, as I've said, the urban, suburban, and rural locations. Now we're having some counties, Williamson County, Rutherford County, Wilson, and I think a few others that have polling centers versus precincts. So that means on election day, wherever you live in the county, it doesn't matter where you go vote. And that's interesting to continue to observe how those are working. We did quite an intensive poll watching the first time Rutherford County did it, which was the first county to pilot it, and really we're very pleased it worked well. And like I said before, we'll just keep repeating things. On the League of Women Voters Tennessee, lwvtn.org website, there's a polling tab and the report form is there. You can do it while you're out poll watching if you want. The sooner you do it, the better. Hopefully this is even better than in the past when, people have to fill out a form and mail it to me or scan it to me. This should make it a lot easier.
Thank you. So there are various resources available to you. There's obviously, we mentioned it a few times, if you've not downloaded it yourself, we would encourage you to do so. Go Vote TN is actually pretty terrific. It helps you familiarize what's acceptable voter ID, which is very important, especially for those, as Marion mentioned, less experienced poll workers who might just innocently be turning a voter away. There's also voter registration lookup in case someone wonders, well, I thought I was registered to vote. You could go outside and help voters see whether they were or not. The poll watching tab, there are these three forms specifically. There's the sign up tab. The assessment report is just your overall impressions on the various things that we talked about, as well as an incident report should you observe one. If you choose to get the presentation live, you can read about some press and the Tennessee law, which I'm going to go through later in the presentation. We're also going to provide some phone numbers. Go ahead, Marion.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we're going to give you a packet if you're going to poll watch, and it'll have the phone numbers. It'll have a list of the acceptable IDs, and we'll be talking a little bit about provisional ballots. We'll have information about that. So enjoy the webinar here. You don't need to remember everything because it'll be in the packet. You can use it as a reference.
Thank you. Just a few things to keep in mind. For voters, appropriate ID is more than a current driver's license. We've already said, if you see a voter turned away, follow them past the 100-foot and see if they have an alternative idea. Encourage them to go back in and speak to the poll official. Encourage them to go back in and vote. That you also want to make sure that provisional ballots are being provided. That's when you arrive, make sure they have them, and then observe if they're being done, and ask if the poll workers themselves have Go Vote TN downloaded for their reference. It's a nice thing to ask when you arrive. If problems are not resolved, and again, we're not expecting you to have problems, but should there be one, if it's a voter problem, call 866-OUR-VOTE. That's a number that's been at previous elections, and it's well staffed and it has a good reputation. If the polling place, go ahead.
This is the national. This is a long-standing partnership with LWVUS. This 866-OUR-VOTE. It's the lawyers committee that actually runs it, but we are a national partner with it.
If the issue is a polling place issue, including poll workers themselves, go to the poll official in charge. For lots of things, that's your first step. Go to the poll official in charge. If you're still not satisfied, call the local election mission or 866-OUR-VOTE. If the problem is with certification, then call one of the phone numbers. I don't know if we're going to have 432. We think 4, but you'll have somebody to call to straighten out your certification. We'll make sure we have someone available to field that kind of call. But again, 866-OUR-VOTE, poll official, not just a poll worker, but the actual official that you check in with in the morning. or the local election commission, which you know because you researched who your local election commission is before you did that. All right, we've come to our first pause. I'm going to stop my share. And we're going to see if anyone has any questions. Anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I do. So if we have a question about a voter, say a voter's been challenged and we don't think that that challenge makes any sense, do we go beyond the 100 feet to talk to that voter? I mean, what are the rules? We're inside the voting place, but what can we do inside there as opposed to being outside the boundary?
Inside the polling place, you can talk to the poll official and ask what the issue was. My understanding is, and again, I've never seen a voter challenged, but if they are, they still get to vote, but it may be provisional till the challenge is resolved. But no voter should leave without voting. And then, yes, I would follow the voter outside and add to the information. And you might have to, the sequence of this will depend. You don't want the voter to get away without talking to the voter. Find out what the issue was. Depending, you probably want them to call 866-OUR-VOTE, especially if it was a challenge. That I don't think Tennessee has a history of challenges, and that would be something we would want to be aware of if voters start getting challenged. I don't know if anybody else has other information to add to that, but that's what I would want to see somebody do. And we say encourage you to do all of this. Recognize the voter may not want to talk to you, which is, they may be so upset they just don't want to talk to anybody. And you know, don't force yourself on them. I'm thinking the poll official would be quite pleased to have a neutral party to explain to what the issue is.
You can also let the voter know about the 866-OUR-VOTE number, and they can call themselves.
Yes.
Karen, you have a question.
Yes, thank you. I am wondering what, if any, opportunities we should take to report something that we've seen when we're voting. So for example, I poll watched, and then 2 days later, I went to the same location to vote and had a different experience, nothing bad, but much longer lines, et cetera. So had I seen something good or bad that I wanted to report, since I'm not officially watching that day, what should I do?
Oh, just send in, just go to fill out one of the forms. Probably you could do the incident form or either one, and just put that information on it, and that would add to the data. That'd be very nice if you did that.
Yep.
Even though I'm not officially signed up for that day. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, you could comment somewhere that, hey, I just observed this when I was voting. I think there's anything else you want to tell us at the end?
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Webb, you have a question?
Yes, how you all doing? I just have a quick comment. I have worked at early voting for the last few elections, and what they're telling us in our training is to make sure that every person who comes in to vote. Make sure it's like go out of your way to make sure that individual is able to vote. So I just wanted to share that information with you.
Yes. Yes. And yes. So if outside of the cities, or even depending on the precinct officer, every once in a while, somebody decides they know better and treat provisional ballots like, that they're not, that they're so precious they can't be, spared. And that's just not the way it's supposed to be. They are there for making sure that every vote that can count could count, will count. Now, if it's a provisional ballot, that means there's an issue that has to be resolved, but it can be resolved sometimes anyway.
Yes. Thank you.
Rosemary,
Thank
what is
you.
your question, Rosemary?
I have worked as a poll official before, and when we found out someone was not registered at that precinct,
Mhm.
they were given the address for the precinct they were supposed to go to. Would that be preferable or the choice rather than a provisional ballot?
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely, because yes, because if they vote in the wrong precinct, if they're registered and vote in the wrong precinct provisionally, their vote won't count. And that's
Right.
where the Go Vote, that's where the Go Vote TN app is so helpful. Before that app, if somebody's not registered, but they insisted they are, they would have to wait in line to get up to the clerk, and the clerk may or may not have the full list to be able to tell them where they're registered. So they might have to call the central office, and it would long time. With the Go Vote TN app, you can just put their name, and I think it's either birthday or something, there's their name and then one other thing to identify them, and it will tell them where they're registered. And you say, oh, you need to go vote, over there. And
Mhm.
oh, good heavens, if they're registered in a different county, they definitely need to go to the other county. They need to go vote where they're registered. Yes. Yes.
Good.
Dr. Webb, do
Thank
you
you.
have another question? Your hand is still raised?
No, I actually was gonna put it down now. Thank
No
you.
worries. No, just wanted to make sure. Rosemary, thank you
Okay.
for the segue, because we're going to do some scenarios on provisional voting. So that's just great. I'm going to share my screen again. There we go. Okay. So we're going to talk more specifically about when you get a provisional ballot and when another choice is appropriate. So here are some examples that you might think or not. You would have a provisional ballot, not acceptable ID, you're in the wrong precinct, the voter's name is not on the voter rolls, the address is changed, but it's not correct on the voter rolls, voter is wearing campaign material, which by the way is verboten, voter requested an absentee ballot but didn't use it, the voter did not register to vote by the deadline, and it's a convicted felon who claims voting rights were restored. So all of those are kind of interesting problems. The first one, not acceptable voter ID. Yes, a provisional ballot should be provided, and the voters should be told where to bring appropriate ID. So they arrive there. Marion, go ahead.
Yeah, and by when to bring it. And remember, your packet will have a list of acceptable IDs. So familiarize yourself with that. It makes sure you know that they really don't have an acceptable ID.
The next one is what Rosemary just said, that the voting in the wrong precinct. The voters should not be given a provisional ballot. They should be redirected to the correct precinct. And that, by the way, this really is not a problem, obviously, if there are voting centers or early voting. The voter's name is not on the voter rolls. Yes, a provisional ballot should be provided, and if appropriate, include that the voter believes they are registered to vote. The poll worker may or may not do that, but yes, they should be given a provisional ballot. This one's a little tricky. We had some different conversations around this. This is where the address is changed, but it's not caught up on the voter rolls. So the voter will be provided what they call a fail-safe ballot. Voters should fill out an address affirmation form where they've gone to vote, signed by the poll official there, and used to vote in an early voting site or taken to the correct precinct provided by poll official on election day. So it's very important that they get an address affirmation form signed by the poll official.
And then,
go ahead.
So just to clear, and if you think about it, I'm a systems engineer, so I think about it from a system. So Jane Smith is registered in this one precinct, but she has moved to a different precinct in that county. Well, the new precinct isn't going to let her vote because they don't know that she's a registered voter. So she goes to where she's registered. They sign, they get a form signed. They know that she's not going to vote there. That's what they're affirming. And then she goes to the new place. I just want to also comment on the first one on this slide. So if the voter's name is not on the voter rolls, it's a good thing to check GoVoteTN to make sure it's just not a case of they showed up at the wrong precinct. They're at the wrong precinct, they just need to go to the right one. But if they're not on the rolls, yes, they need a provisional ballot and they need to explain on that why they believe that they actually were registered to vote and some glitch kept them off the rolls.
So the next one, this is kind of comical, but really people shouldn't be wearing campaign material to vote, and they should be politely asked to take it off and come back and vote. So that's what should happen if someone wears campaign material to vote. The voter didn't use their absentee ballot. Yes, absolutely. A provisional ballot should be provided. It's kind of confusing, I think, not confusing, but it's provisional ballot's a little less sure than actual ballot. So if someone requests an absentee ballot, it's better to use it than go to the poll. I guess I'm stating the obvious on that, aren't I? Next.
Well, but it is better to use it. But if you're concerned about whether it's going to get to the election commission on time, go vote provisional, because your absentee ballot will not count if it gets there after election day.
Yep.
So if it's 2 days before the election, it's probably better to vote provisional. And again, from a system's point of view, their records show that you got an absentee ballot. They cannot let you vote on a machine because they're concerned you would have voted twice. If you fill out a provisional ballot and say, I did not use my absentee ballot, that can be checked. And if there's no absentee ballot received from you, that provisional vote will count.
The voter did not register by the deadline. Yeah, so the voter is technically not eligible to vote in this election. They can still fill out a ballot. They won't, even though it won't count, and also register to vote for the next election. Election commissions like to say no voter is turned away, and they want everyone to vote who can. That's was personally said to be my election commission here, which is in Blount County. And so they, sadly, their vote won't count, but hopefully they'll be primed to vote next time. As far as a convicted felon,
Yeah, and they might have,
go ahead.
yeah, well, they might have thought they registered to vote, but there's nothing better to have 2 registrations in than not have any. So this is kind of maybe a belt and suspenders, but it's just to be safe. If the voter is not on the list and they thought they registered, just another registration form is always a good idea.
And a convicted felon who claims their voting rights were restored. Yes, absolutely, a provisional ballot should be provided in that example. All right. Moving on to voter intimidation. We hope you don't witness it. We hope there isn't any, but it's around these days, isn't it? So what should you do? First of all, notify election officials, specifically the person in charge. Call 1-866-OUR-VOTE to report the incident. And if you feel comfortable, follow the voter outside and ask them if they would like to discuss the incident. So always first line, talk to the poll official. Second line, call 866-OUR-VOTE, and then move on to talk to the voter themselves. This is a special instance. A voter comes in needing assistance. It could be for language. It could be just the vision issues. A number of things could make it hard for an individual to vote. The person may bring someone with them to help them as long as the person is identified to the poll workers and signs the appropriate form. They can ask the poll workers themselves for assistance. Important to note, if that's the case, both a Republican and a Democrat must help the voter at the voting booth specifically. Not one of both have to be there. And finally, any voter getting assistance beyond how to operate the machine must sign a form including person who came with voter. I'm reemphasizing that for its importance. So that's what happens if a voter should need assistance. We've come to our next period of questions. And by the way, the third period is going to be about election law. So just to know what's ahead. So do you have any questions on this section?
And while you're thinking of questions, I just want to make a comment that along with observing the assistance, keep we need to have our antenna out for just how voters with disabilities are treated, how, if, is the place accessible, is it user friendly to people with all various kinds of challenges.
So Dr. Webb, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. When we were talking about using the provisional ballots, what if a person has been purged from the rolls? Are they still allowed to fill out the provisional ballot?
That's a good question, actually.
Uh,
That's a good question.
yes. If they've been purged from the rolls, they should fill out a provisional ballot and the voter registration card that goes with it. I don't know if there's been any successful challenges of, hey, I shouldn't have been purged, but they definitely should fill out a provisional ballot with a new voter registration form. That would be a case where I would be quite interested in the league poll watcher finding out when and why they were purged. We have had over the last several years, a few instances of voters calling us complaining they had been purged from the voting rolls. And honestly, when we've researched them, they should have been, they moved, they didn't respond to there's a prescribed process for how voters are supposed to be taken off the rolls. So if you change your address with the post office, you will eventually get a card from the election commission saying, we think you moved, confirm your address. So, but yes, the short answer is yes. Even if they've been taken off the rolls, they should fill out a provisional ballot. And yes, we will email out the packet to everybody who signs up to Poll Watch. And I guess anybody who wants it.
Rosemary, I believe you are up next with a question.
I think you just answered it. I wanted to be sure that I was on the list to get the forms, and you said that I would. So I
Great.
presume
All right.
since I'm
Well,
here,
the forms are under the poll watching tab on the
Okay.
website,
but what
but
you
the
turn
packet will
in.
email you. Yeah, the
Okay,
packet will email.
thank
And
you.
mostly we don't want to put the packet up there because I don't think we all want our cell phone numbers out for anybody to get.
And then Teresa, you have a question?
Hi, I totally understand if this isn't something that you can answer at this point. But do you know if there's a way for someone who was convicted of a felony and wants to restore their rights? Do you know if there's a way for them to look up whether or not their rights have been restored?
I do.
Well,
not
they
know.
would have had to go through a process that they initiated to get their voting rights restored. So the first thing I would do is check to see if they're on the voter registration. I mean, it's a specific process where it's part of they do that and then hand in the certificate with the voter registration form. So I would check to see first, are they registered? And then if not, they need to get the process started. And there's a lot of resources for how they can go about doing that.
All right.
And I would add to that the whole process really requires the initiative of the individual who's involved. So there's nothing automatic about it. So if they haven't done it with intentionality, then they're not on the list.
Okay, good to know.
But if their record has been expunged, then they are eligible to vote.
Okay. Any more questions at this point? The next section, we're going to go in bullet point form through the Tennessee statute. And I think you find some things interesting, but we are kind of going point by point on the next section. So that's what's coming up. And the specific Tennessee code, who may appoint poll watchers? Well, political parties, a candidate, and citizens organizations interested in the question on the ballot. And then we've augmented it to say, interested in preserving the purity of elections and guarding against the abuse of the elective franchise. So when you see purple type here, that's some league words that we've added. How many poll watchers? Political parties may appoint 2. Each candidate may appoint 1. Although multiple poll watchers may be appointed, only one of the poll watchers may be in a polling place at any given time. That's important to know. And then each citizen organization may appoint 2. How are poll watchers appointed? The appointed authority, and that in our case, it would be the League of Women Voters Tennessee, must submit a signed request to the County Election Commission that you've selected and where you want to poll watch. Appointments may designate the same person to serve in more than one polling location. And again, it's just important you when you sign up, let people know where you want to serve. In order to get the certification process, is advised to seek certification, and I believe this is something Marion said earlier. Go ahead and get it even if you're not planning to use it. It's better to have than not have. And that you actually get a paper credential that needs to be showed when you go poll watch. Okay. You can work either early voting at the county election, all these various locations, and at election day at the polling site. And while we haven't talked about it a lot, you can also poll watch at the counting board, but be forewarned, if you've ever been part of a counting process, you are there for the whole day. You come in, they basically lock you in, and then you can't leave until the polls are closed. But you certainly can poll watch there. When must appointments be made? No later than 2 business days before the first day of early voting. Well, basically, you can read all of these in detail because that's what they've written, but basically 2 business days ahead of time is what you need to do. But we'd encourage making decisions faster and getting all your paperwork done earlier. So when you arrive on the polling place, a poll watcher must display his appointment to the officer of elections. You'll sign the poll watcher register. And throughout the day, you need to have something that has your name and clearly says that you're a poll watcher. Your county election commission should provide you with what you need. So, but you just need to know that you will be expected to have those things.
I just want to comment on that. It varies a lot. So if you have a lanyard where you can put things in it, you might want to do that, because sometimes it's just been a piece of paper and a straight pin to pin on your clothes, and that's not as comfortable to wear as maybe something you just hang over your neck.
What may poll watchers do? It's important that while you are watching and inspecting performance in and around poll workers, you cannot look over shoulders of poll workers. The Election Commission really does not want us to talk to poll workers. If we have issues, take it up with the officer of elections. That's really the place to go. And you actually can challenge a voter, but that would be done through the poll official there. During preparation, these next 2 points really apply to, say, if you're in the counting room, inspecting the poll list, inspecting the ballots while being called and counted. During preparation certification, inspect the tally sheets and present a protest of any aspect of the conduct of the election to the officers of election, county commission, or inspector. What may you not do? Interfere with any voter in preparing or casting voters' ballot. That's why if you're going to talk to a voter, you really need to go outside that 100-foot boundary. Prevent election fit, same sort of thing. Can't really interfere with the election official. You can't expect signature lists during the election hours. You really can't observe the giving of assistance to a voter. We've already talked about you can't wear campaign material. If you are in the counting room, you cannot exit until it's all over after the polls have closed. And if you're, again, in the counting place, you cannot have electronic devices. Those are taken away from you when you start the counting process. And speak to voters outside of, within the boundaries. Okay. We're kind of beating a bit of a dead horse here, but it is part of the statute that you cannot engage in polling activities within that area. Outside the 100-foot boundary, you certainly can. we've probably overemphasized the 100-foot boundary, but it's just important to know where you need to be if you want to talk to a voter or do anything else that is even considered campaigning. Of course, we are nonpartisan. We would think that you wouldn't be campaigning anyway, not as League of Women Voter, Tennessee poll watcher. Importantly, candidates, candidate spouse, and county election commissions cannot be appointed as poll watchers. That's the last slide I got. So we're going to stop share and see if there are additional questions, not just about that section, but really just about anything. Barbara, you have a question. Barbara, you may be on mute. We cannot see you.
Yes, I'm sorry.
No worries.
Okay, so as a poll watcher, once certified, always certified, or is there a recertification process?
Every election, you have to get new credentials.
Okay.
Good question. Anybody else got questions, concerns, enthusiasms, things you're looking forward to? We've got a few minutes. We'd love to hear any other thoughts you have.
Can we kind of clarify a little bit again about the timeline? When would the packets go out with the information? And I mean, when can people expect to get that information?
As soon as we're applying for credentials, we can make that part of what goes out to them.
And who here thinks they might be a poll watcher? I'm just curious. You don't have to commit, but or anyone? Yeah. Still thinking about it? Okay, looks good. I'm not sure I understand your question, Renee. You write, I had wanted to work with someone the first time from rules like not possible. I'm not sure I understand your question.
Okay, I think I do.
Okay, good, thank you.
We can have two people in a polling place at the time from the league. And I think that if anybody who would like to go with somebody else, we can try to arrange that. It depends. I'm happy to have people come with me, but I'm in Nashville, so it depends on where you are. But I think if that would gain people confidence, by all means, we would be happy to make that work. We just need to know where you are and see what we can work out.
Yeah, I think the statute is misleading because a candidate can only have one poll.
Yes, but a citizen organization can have two.
Mm-hmm. We should clarify that.
So
all right. Well, it looks like we could end our time together. Doesn't look like we have any more questions. We appreciate your taking the time to spend with us and learn more about poll watching, and hopefully we've answered any questions you may have had when you walked in here, and hopefully not raised new questions for you that were unanswered. Feel free to reach out to us if there is something that you still are curious about as you go through the process.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you all too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.